President John Jeffery will deliver a keynote address at the launch of the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons National Policy Framework tomorrow. The National Policy Framework seeks to ensure that all government departments and other engaged stakeholders from civil society are collectively guided in the implementation of anti-trafficking responses and, of course, over their legal responsibilities. But to shed more light, we are now joined by the Deputy Minister himself. He's live from our studios in Pretoria. DM, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for coming through. Now, I've given a little background to the framework on my introduction. Tell us more about the importance of this framework, really, and how is it going to help us as the country?
All right, let me just start by talking about the Prevention of and Combating of Trafficking Act. It's quite a complicated act, because trafficking isn't just sexual or trafficking for sexual purposes or for labor. It can be forced marriages, it can be debt bondage, it can be a variety of things. And then it is also something that stretches across international boundaries. It can happen within our own country, but it also can happen that people from other countries are trafficked here for various reasons. So it's very important, it's a complex act, and it's very important that everybody works together in the implementation of the act. And what this policy framework is basically doing just that, trying to make sure that the different government departments, civil society organizations work together in the implementation of the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act.
Now, you talk about everyone coming on board, as this is a complex act, you say, but which parties were really involved in coming up with this policy framework?
This has involved the stakeholders who are involved in the implementation of the act already. We do have a national structure and provincial structures, and that would be different government departments, the police, the prosecuting authority, home affairs, as well as some civil society organizations. And then there's also support from the international community, particularly the UNODC, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, so there's a wide range of players.
But what were government's interventions, Deputy Minister, in terms of fighting human trafficking before this national policy came into being?
Well, the Act came into effect in August 2015. Before that, trafficking for sexual purposes, trafficking of children was a crime. After that, the Act then has been implemented, and this is one of the provisions in the Act that requires a national policy framework that is then being put into effect. And as I said, that's to make the implementation of the Act easier. Trafficking is a huge problem, but one of the problems is that there's anecdotal stories of human trafficking cases, but the number of cases getting reported to the law enforcement agencies are actually relatively low, and there's a big gap between the two. And so something we really need to do is to urge everybody who has any information or evidence relating to trafficking to report it to the law enforcement agencies. If you want to be recognized as somebody who has survived human trafficking, you don't actually have to report it to the police. It is a matter that's then dealt with by the provincial departments of social development.
That was exactly my next question, Deputy Minister, to say for the members of the public who would love to get involved in this national policy, how can they go about it?
Well, it's not so much the national policy, it's the fight against human trafficking. And there's a variety of levels. There's providing support to victims of human trafficking. There's issues of detection, there's issues of prevention. Prevention particularly explaining to people who are vulnerable to human trafficking that they need to be careful of it. Something like debt bondage is something that somebody can get themselves in without really knowing what's happening. Debt bondage is where you owe somebody money, and then in return, or they refuse to effectively release you, you have to work for them until you've actually paid off that debt. So there's awareness issues. There's a whole range of areas that there should be or can be involvement. And anyone who's interested, I think, as I said, there are structures in each of the 9 provinces. So I'd encourage people who are interested in assisting to come forward and to offer their services.
Yeah. Just before I let you go, I just want your take really on the matter of 3 of the Hawks flying squad members who have been arrested for allegedly being involved in human trafficking. Your take really, and what does this say about our law enforcement officers here in the country?
Sorry, I missed the question a bit. Is it members of the Hawks who are allegedly involved in human trafficking?
Yes, dear.
Well, it just goes to show that you know, nobody can be regarded as above the law. We have tried to, or it's the Hawks who primarily from the police's side investigate human trafficking, and that was, I think, particularly to deal with the problems of hopefully less corruption at that level. But the fact that people have been arrested shows that nobody is above the law. But it is a very complex crime. If you do get convicted of human trafficking, you're likely to end up probably with a life sentence.
All right, Deputy Minister, we'll leave it at that. John Jeffery is the Deputy Minister of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, talking to us live from our studios in Pretoria on the National Policy Framework looking into combating human trafficking. Of course, the launch will be tomorrow.